Going to be a great time. Something else going on tonight. Our book club is happening tonight at the Essex County Library. We're going to be joined by Matthew St. Amand, who wrote The Kilominator, an amazing memoir tonight at the Essex County Library. Matthew is going to be joining us. The author will be there to talk about his book. It's wonderful. It's not just about cycling either. Some of it is about his journey into weight loss, into a healthier lifestyle, but also a lot of it is about mental health. A lot of it is about reconciling issues, grieving the loss of a very close childhood friend. It's an extremely touching memoir, almost the way, when if you're walking or biking or jogging or even working out or even just sitting and meditating, when you let your thoughts go and they kind of go to certain places and certain things come up from your past. He writes about that, and he shares stories through his almost meditative state he goes in when he is on his bike traveling, tens, sometimes hundreds of kilometers on his journey, and he tells his story through this way, and he reconciles a lot of what happened in his life. It's a brilliantly written book. It's so touching, and he has a great way of pulling you in, and you kind of share the journey with him. He's going to be there tonight, Essex County Library. Hop on our website, am800cklw.com, and click the Dan's Book Club link. You can reserve your spot for tonight. There are still a few spots open, free. It's free to attend. He'll have some books for sale, too. It's going to be a great talk tonight. I'm really looking forward to kind of diving in with him and with all of you as well. So again, am800cklw.com. Click the Dan's Book Club link and reserve your free spot, and we will see you tonight. Well, hey, welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for coming out on this Thursday evening. How many people is it your first time here at the book club? Great. Yeah, good to see familiar faces, some new faces, some old faces. It's awesome. My name is Dan MacDonald from AM800CKLW, and this is book number 12. I believe this is book number 12. So we've been doing the book club for a year now, and it's kind of cool because the first book we did was The Running Shaped Hole, and it was about somebody who kind of needed some structure in their life. They started running, and it was a great, Robert Earl Smith was the writer, and Robert Earl Stewart was the writer. And it's kind of cool coming full circle, went from running to biking, which is great. This book, how many people have read the book? Excellent, great. It's a wonderful, anyone who hasn't read it, I hope you're okay with spoilers. We do talk about a lot in the book, but even if you haven't read it, any spoilers you hear today, please read it. It is, I'm not just saying this because the author is here. This is one of my favorite books we've done so far in the book club. It affected me on a profound level. I thought it was extremely emotional. I kind of went into this because I had interviewed Matthew on the show before when the book came out. So I kind of had the basic plot in my head. Okay, it's somebody who wanted to change their life. They hopped on a bike. They changed their life. Amazing. I can't wait to read it. I love motivational stories like that. What I was not expecting was the depth, the emotion, the way it would affect me. And I've talked to a few people who have read it, and they were blown away by how they were affected by the story. Powerful read, and it's something we all lived too, right? We all lived through the pandemic, and everyone has their own experiences through that. A lot of up and down emotions, a lot of confusion, a lot of rough times. There were some really great times too. People got to discover themselves. Books were written during that time. People started cycling, for example. A lot of huge things happened. So I guess it's all perspective at the end. But this book is such an amazing. To say it's a snapshot in time would be inaccurate because time is such a strange, fluid thing in this book, the way it's written. I've never read a book quite like this. It really did move me, and I have a lot of questions to ask. I know this irks a lot of people, but I'm a highlighter in books. People are like, what are you doing? People don't like when you bend the pages. I do highlight passages in books for a book club or not because I like to go back and read certain sections, and in the case of the book club, I like to read sections and then ask the author about it. So you get to see me book nerd out today. So I have a lot of questions for the author. A wonderful read, and we always start the book club by before we get to anything by, if you would be so kind as to share a passage from the Kilominator. And ladies and gentlemen, Matthew St. Amand, the author today.
Thanks very much for coming. I will start early in the book when I took my first ride as an adult on a bicycle. The epoch was BC, before children, in 2005, the riding epoch. And this was at a time when I weighed probably close to 300 pounds. It wasn't for a lack of trying that I didn't make it over 300. And was a technical writer, had been laid off from my job in Michigan and doing some freelance writing here and at loose ends and raiding the refrigerator all the time and just not knowing what to do with myself. So it was in the winter of 2005, and I had gone out to shovel the driveway. The winter morning, the riding epoch began. I paced the living room after my wife left for work. There was no garbage collectors to watch that day, no further weather reports to catch on TV, my nervous system crackling like a Tesla coil with anxiety and fear of the future. I bundled up and went outside to shovel snow from the driveway. It had snowed the night before. The weatherman was as surprised as anyone else by its appearance. And I thought some manual labor might check my malaise. At one point, a snowplow blasted by, and I envied the driver, though his work was as seasonal and sporadic as my own. When the job was done, I moved to put the shovel away and stopped. At the back of the garage was one of my father-in-law's only earthly possessions, a battered entry-level mountain bike. Arthur Murphy, a ginger-haired man who smiled with his eyes, lost his battle with the frailties of the body far too soon. He had died 2 years before at the age of 54. Aside from a plastic bin filled with Steven Seagal and Chuck Norris movies and other assorted VHS video cassettes, the mountain bike was the sum total of his legacy. In the fullness of time, it would turn out to be more than I could have hoped for. That winter's day, for no discernible reason, the bike appeared before me like an oracle. Aware of the griping aches in my shoulders, lower back, and forearms, nagged by the undying desire to eat something, mulling the writing awaiting my attention, a plumbing supply advertorial, toilets with knuckle-gripped handles, flush odometers, 8-track players, retro-ironic toilets with pull chains. If only they were that interesting. No, all these toilets had to offer were sleek lines and the ability to flush in low tones. I had to find 800 words to describe their worldview. Clad in my winter vestments, breathing hard, the wind already negating my work on the driveway, it was as though I stood naked looking at an artifact. Is it about a bicycle? Chimed a memory of Flann O'Brien's novel, The Third Policeman, where the murder of a bicycle set the story in motion. The atomic theory. If a man rides a bicycle long enough, the bouncing causes enough man molecules to pass into the bicycle and enough bicycle molecules to pass into the man. After a period of years, the man becomes part bicycle and the bicycle becomes part man. An old bicycle was found thrashed in The Third Policeman, and the blackguard who perpetrated the deed was considered a murderer. I went to the mountain bike, put my gloved hands on its handlebars. They were like electrodes sending sparks of memory through my nervous system. Cameron Avenue, J.T. Hurley, Leslie Damaris, the old neighborhoods and faces of my youth. Before I knew it, I sat upon the bicycle and moved out of the garage. After shutting the door, I rolled down the snowy driveway to the street. As I came to the berm of snow at its base, I reached for the handbrakes but didn't engage them. I turned right onto the road. As my momentum ebbed, I placed my boots on the pedals and pedaled the bicycle. The motion was transforming, simple as picking out chopsticks on a piano or doodling a smiley face, thrilling as jumping through a ring of fire on water skis. I pedaled the bicycle. When I came to a corner, I turned and headed down the next street. When I came to the next corner, I made another turn. The slushy snow was like cake icing beneath the front tire. I pedaled and trudged and heaved and gasped through the inclement morning, recalling the old neighborhood. Stomping grounds was Dad's word for it, where my friends and I explored the streets and alleys of West Windsor on our bikes, racing through schoolyards, vacant lots, honing our skidding stops on gravel driveways, thinking our clouds of dust as smoke rising from scorched tires. I thought of Curry Avenue and Leslie, the first girl I ever loved. We were classmates from kindergarten to 8th grade. She was my magnetic north, blonde and pretty, one of the gentlest souls I ever knew. Magellan navigated by the stars. I navigated those burgeoning years by Leslie, and never spoke a word of it to her or anyone else. Riding my bike down her street, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. Sometimes I did, but never often enough. Thought of my old friend, J.T. Hurley. He was 18 months older than me. He was a genius of fun, the leader of our games. His bicycle was a battered old orange jalopy with a banana seat and chopper handlebars. I remembered the afternoon in 1977 when he demonstrated for me and my brother a ramp that he had built from scrap wood that a neighbor gave to him. Those were the days of Evel Knievel, where a ramp was pointless unless you had something to jump. So he asked me to lie down in front of the ramp. I lumbered along Malden Road on the bicycle past Sandwich Secondary, all the way to LaSalle Public Library, nearly 8 kilometers from my home. There I leaned the bike against the snowbound bike rack out front. Desperately overheating, I unzipped my parka. The cloud of steam rising off of me probably queered barometers throughout the county. I lurched into the building, pulling my damp hat from my head. A lone, wide-eyed librarian watched me from the counter. I stumbled to the nearest seat, an empty study table, letting my parka fall from me like an exoskeleton. It was approximately 11 o'clock in the morning. Legs throbbing, breathing labored, a thought dawned. Now I have to get home. As I pondered my situation, someone entered the library. A moment later, I heard voices speaking at the checkout desk. I turned and saw Duncan Swinburne, editor of the Neighborhood Caller, an old acquaintance from the university's English department, delivering copies of the newspaper. He looked in my direction, did a double take, and regarded me with a look of bemused confusion. "What happened to you?" he said. I explained my sudden desire to ride a bicycle. "That's your bike outside?" he said, chuckling. I nodded. "Do you need a lift home?" "No, but thanks. I got myself here. Trailing off, I was still breathing hard. "Okay, good luck." Duncan departed, continuing with his morning deliveries. Soon after, I rose from my chair, my legs cramping, suddenly wary of my next move. I donned my clammy parka and hat and went outside to the bicycle.
Awesome. So, talk about full circle, coming literally to the library, and and here we are. The character, Duncan Swinburne, editor of Neighborhood Caller, who is he?
That was Robert Earl Stewart.
How wild!
Delivering the LaSalle Post, and just wanted to cover his bases. Said, okay, when we hear that you've expired, I did do my due diligence.
Yes,
I offered help, and you declined help. So,
because I only learned that today that was him. You told me that it was Robert Earl Stewart who witnessed the first ride to LaSalle. I'm like, how full circle is that? It's book number 12, and he makes a cameo in this book. That blows my mind. And I believe too. Before we dive in here. You also recently hit another goal. I know when this book was published, you've logged more than 50,000 kilometers. I believe you hit another milestone, though.
Hit 65,000 on yesterday.
Yeah, wow, yes. Incredible. It's mind-blowing. I recall I had you on my show, I forget when, but it was maybe back in the summertime, and I want to say you had just hit a milestone around that time as well.
60,000 that day.
That was 60.
Well.
Wow. Well, this is
a lot of pressure to please Dan.
And next time it better be 70. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. No, congratulations. That's outstanding. That's amazing. So just going back really quickly to that day when you biked out to this library, it seemed like such a random thing. It seems like such a movie scene too. Like when you first see the bike, it's almost like you can picture a ray of light coming down and you touch it and there's sparks and it's like the origins of that. Like, so did you ever think in your wildest dreams there'll be a time, not a few years down the road, I'll be logging 65,000 kilometers? Did you think this is a one-off, or was it something that really called to you right away?
I kept going all the way to the library. I thought I would just go around the block, or I thought I'd go to the end of the street or until I fell or something like that, because there's snow trucks outside. So not the best conditions. And so I thought I would do that, but it actually felt quite nice to be rolling.
Yeah.
So I thought I'll turn at this corner, I'll turn at that corner. And the next thing, very unwisely, I now know I'm going down Malden Road. Well, Malden Road's this is before they had a bike path on it.
Right.
And people did their best. They said, look, he's hurting himself more, let him go. Then if I put him in the ditch, I'll end it early.
It's a fascinating read. It blew my mind, this entire book, the way you kind of did snapshots, and it reminded. I'll be honest, I always kind of put myself in the book whenever I read, and I read this at a certain time in my life where it was just like, wow, this is truly hitting home. Focusing on writing a bit more too. I wrote copy as well for a long time for radio. Before I was on the radio, I did advertorials and a lot of the same stuff. So I resonated with me a lot. The whole being unhappy and the lifestyle, that resonated. But when did you realize, or you hopped on that bike, things started to happen, the pandemic hit, when did you realize, I think I have a book here?
I was actually already writing a book. I was writing a book called Gas a Tank. My next door neighbor is an OPP, a retired OPP constable, and I thought, well, surely he must have some stories. And he did. And so that was great. So between riding, I was writing. But so then I thought, am I really going to start another book while I'm in the middle of a book? And I thought, of course, I think I will. And I started as a blog, and then had, I think, 2 readers. I ultimately built up to a worldwide audience of 13. But to even have, knowing there was somebody on the other side, the first few chapters were these blog posts, and I'd refine them after, but that's how that kind of started, just to see, because I don't have any advice. I don't know enough about cycling to try and guide someone.
Right.
There's a really good Facebook group that I'm a part of that they can answer every question about nutrition and this and that. I just know you should wear your helmet, you should have lights on your bike, and don't go down Malden Road.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, seriously. Well, I just thought, and like you said, I knew a bit about this book. I knew the basic plot of it. I knew your story and whatnot, and I knew at that point you had clocked 50,000 kilometers. So I kind of thought, okay, it's going to be, somebody finding their stride, using a bike as their vehicle. What I didn't expect was the emotion. And this one line here, just, you kind of talk about how, you mentioned how that dad went for walks and played racquetball and never experienced the zone where the mind dropped through pinprick wormholes during a run, or as I now learned, during a bike ride. I was there, not there. Quite a pleasant experience, really. The mind sitting in a dime roller coaster car cascading through memory. Like, holy, beautiful way. Like, there, not there. That was a theme throughout the entire book, right to the very end, with memory and present and not present, supernatural and not supernatural, reality and fiction. I thought it was incredible. Was that a theme that just kind of, it seems like to me, organically came about, that theme that was ongoing throughout the book?
So. Yeah. I mean, at times there are moments when it's very pleasant, and then there's other times where it's not very helpful. You're at work and someone asks, well, why didn't you think to do that? You were there, but I wasn't there. And so that can happen, but it's like a kind of a quantum thing, not to be too fancy about it, but it's, I'm riding, and where your imagination can go, that there's enough of me working that I'm keeping the bike upright. And there are moments, though, with the concession roads, I will look up and I will go, am I on L'Esperance or Disputed or, and it really takes a moment because they're so similar. They all look alike. And I've gotten lost, and I did a FaceTime with my wife and kids one Sunday morning. I was coming back from Emeryville, and my usual route was blocked for some reason. Coming down one of these roads, I thought, okay, what part of LaSalle am I going to be entering now? And I came up to a main road, and it said Manning. And I said, wow, what? And I was complete. Now, it was a beautiful Sunday morning in the summer, and it just adds kilometers when you get lost. But I had completely lost my bearings. I was lost in our backyard, which is really kind of funny.
Yeah. Did you find you ever went down that same wormhole writing, where you're writing to kind of get to that sweet spot where the words are coming and it's going, and you're like, how am I even, where is this coming from right now? Do you find that same type of not disassociation, but do you know what I mean when you're writing?
Yeah, I want to capture it, but believe it or not, it's almost the other way around. It's like holding onto a horse. Like I'm now at a point, I've been writing since 1988. Right. So pumping out words is not a problem, but making the words count is the problem. So I'm always, once it gets going good, I'll stop. which I know sounds crazy, but that's when I will stop. I will break the action because I can pour out the words, but they won't be as pointed as this. So this is the result of my method of stopping
Wow.
when it goes well.
It's
So,
incredible. And I love this line too about writing. I have questions specifically about a lot of people who are in this book, some of who are joining us here today as well. It's very cool, by the way, to see your family here, your wife and 2 kids. Very, very
they're
cool.
the best.
I'm
Thank you,
gonna
guys.
out them. They're here. I always kind of nerd out when I read a book, and it's like, oh, there's the kids, and there's the mom, and it's great. And your neighbor too, Todd, who you wrote Gas of Tank with. He makes neighbor Todd his neighbor. That's Todd, right?
Yeah.
He's in the book a lot too. So it's a really cool, all the worlds colliding in this book. It's great. But I love this line: as a writer, I am given to magical thinking. I pursue it. I cultivate it. Though I do not live my life by it. After all, I am a realist. I live in a world of robots and wristwatches, partness and proc sensors. There are real consequences to our actions, often unforeseen. I thought that was beautiful, and that was, to me, it summed up a lot of the book. I highlighted that immediately. It's one of the first things I highlighted in the book. And then kind of reading it with that in my head, it blew my mind how much it kept coming back. The magical thinking, the way you'd be writing. And I don't know how to ask this, but asking, how did you write this where you would merge in and out of present to past? So was that that had to be difficult to write, to organize your thoughts? Because I imagine a zillion things go through your head while you're biking.
They do. To be honest, that's actually how my mind works. So that's how it most naturally felt to write it. Now I would read back to make sure I'm not losing the thread, because I'm the king of losing the thread.
Right.
But that's kind of how it works. And I do find there are kind of these natural connections, like riding my bike to the LaSalle Public Library in 2005 and running into Bob Stewart, and then him, like just these natural coincidences that happen.
Yeah.
And so I just let it go, and then the connections usually show up.
Right. Yeah. How was it just to turn the attention here? How was it reading about yourselves in this book? Was it? Anyway, how was it? I mean, I don't know too many people who are in books, but what is it like for you two being in a book? You haven't read the book. Yeah, I guess you haven't yet. Parts of it, yes. Do you plan to read it eventually one day? Yeah. Awesome. It's very cool. I think you're going to like it a lot.
Because the whole time I'm writing it feels so self-indulgent. The page is continuously saying to me, who the hell cares? Who cares? Who cares? Who cares? It's fine that you're amusing yourself. I mean, you're not doing drugs right now. You're not robbing a pharmacy. So like this is all right, but really, who else would care about this? And I just thought, well, maybe somebody will. I don't know, and maybe not too many people, but maybe someone else.
I think it's incredible. I think it's an important book to read, actually, because it was so relatable. When you first got the job, I like the way you named all the companies too. Okay. The one that was very, very confusing, and you walked in, you kept thinking, like, what am I doing? Like, I'm so over my head with this. Like, this is so not me. Like, I think many of us can probably relate to that. You start a new job, and you're like, I fooled them getting this job because I am not your person for this job. Yeah. Now I got to keep this charade up and act like I know what I'm doing. Like, it's very, very relatable, very vulnerable too. Was that a frightening thing? Because you put a lot of yourself in this book. Like, it was very vulnerable. I know you a bit, but I don't know you that well. There were moments, and I know I'm not alone. Did anyone else shed a tear or two reading this? Like, it was like every time JT, and I have a whole other section about JT. Every time his name came up, I'd be like, here we go, grab the Kleenex, like, here it comes, you know what I mean? Yeah. But was that a frightening thing, writing about yourself so openly and about people that you know are going to read this so openly?
Not really, honestly. Over the years of writing, I feel what I'm saying is true, and I honestly have like the sensation of being like the nose cone of a rocket. Like I feel like impervious, so I just blast ahead.
Right. Yeah.
Quite honestly, like. And, I've just gotten, like, that's how I am. And so when I'm walking out on the shop floor, when I was a technical writer at a machine shop, I am not handy in the least. And it was one of the most truthful job interviews I've ever had, because I just thought, I'm not going to lie to them and lose an arm, on this thing. So I said, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do that. I don't have to do. They go, but can you take pictures? Well, I have taken pictures. Good enough. You use Microsoft Word. Yeah, I can use it. Great. Okay, how about we start like right now? And then I'm walking around the shop and just all the sounds and the stuff that going by on the cranes, and I'm following the lines, but there's stuff in the lines. So if I step out of the lines, and then there's radios going off and over, and
You depicted that. I had anxiety just reading it, thinking like, oh my god, how's he going to get through this? But I thought it was beautifully written, beautifully done. Where did the line? I remember asking you this on the show, and I can't quite remember the answer. Where did the name the Kilominator come from?
it just appeared in
That
my
is something
mind.
you made up, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
It just I just was riding one day, and just the accumulation of kilometers, and it just got jumbled in my head. That Kilominator. For some reason, when I write things, I have a play called negatunity, and that's another word that I coin, as if I'm on par with Shakespeare here with creating my own words. But just sometimes you make up the word that serves the purpose.
Yeah,
So.
I use negativity now. It's added to my vocabulary.
Okay.
Another one, somebody told me this once, was accutunity. It's a fake word. It's a made-up word, but it's an opportunity to be active. So when you're at Devonshire Mall, park in the very back, that's an accutunity to get a couple of steps in to walk up. So I always say this is an accutunity right now. Now negatunity is going to be added to the vocabulary. Awesome. Beautiful stuff, though, the writing. And I do want to talk about J.T. Hurley. Your like what a story that was. He had such a profound impact on you. Why was it you think he kept on appearing throughout the story, almost from the very beginning right to the very end? Like what was that thread? Where did that come from?
Well, it's just that's my daily life. I just I can remember his passing, and he just was this wonderful, bombastic personality, and then also in that realm of the real unreal. And I have no doubt it's just me telling myself, but there's times when I do feel his presence near me. I mean, I'm at work the one day. I mean, this Friday before Labor Day weekend, I can never figure it out and book the day off on the Friday. So I'm like the lone guy in the office going, yeah, everybody else knew. Everybody else knew. I can make as much coffee as I want, I guess. And it would be one of the days where it's like, okay, I'll look at the news a bit longer or whatever. And then I did this internet search that I would do every once in a while because I had forgotten exactly what year. I thought it was 1978 that he'd passed away. Never knew where his burial site was. And I put in this the search, and this one time, all the information I wanted popped up. And but at that moment, I guess the reason why I'm saying this anecdote is I had the most profound sense that he was standing right at my right shoulder. Like not at my left shoulder, he was standing right here, and I don't know how to describe someone's presence other than, when you're sitting somewhere and you turn and someone is there and you've had a sense, like it was honestly quite like that.
Yeah.
And it comes and goes.
That image, I forget how old you were when it happened, but I can't find the section when you woke up in your bedroom one morning and the light was coming in through the blinds, and for a split second you said, am I really seeing this? And you're like, there's his blue shirt, there's his head, there's his face. That had to be an odd. That's something that really happened. I know you said I'm going to say it. Here it is. It sounds wild, but this is what I saw.
Yeah, it was an ordinary weekday, about 2 or 3 months after, and I just lay there looking at it, and I mean, this is the bedroom where I had slept in for 7 years, and was very familiar any time of the day or night that I'd be there. When cars drove by, I knew exactly where the light would go, and this was a blob of light that was unlike any that I had seen before, and just looked at it until my eye lost the thread of it, and then I just got up and went to school.
Yeah. Well, a part that haunted me was the recurring "he was us." When you said you talk a bit about how the section here that then air blasted back into the world. I took a breath. The sounds, the neighborhood banged back. A pair of hands wrapped around my torso. When you almost get hit by a car, that's what it was. That section there. When you were a young kid, I thought that was so interesting. How I can actually trace back us sitting here in this room. We're all sitting here. I'm doing this radio show and doing this book club because somebody in 2002 picked up a camera and said, "Do you care if I take your photo?" and snapped a photo. Literally, if that did not happen, I would never have a radio show. I wouldn't have did your book for a book club. And I do things like that all the time where I try to trace things back. And I saw you doing a little bit of that in this book, like when you went back and said, what if I hung out on my front lawn before running out into the road for 30 more seconds? Maybe that car would have hit me, and JT would have outlived you. Or what if JT did live and did something that ended your life early. Is that something you do often where you trace back? Because you did it a few times in this book, I noticed. I thought that was interesting.
Oh, right. Well, being a writer, I mean, I'm always kind of stress testing things to see the kind of story possibilities, and gotten away from writing fiction, but not entirely. And so my mind, for good and bad, because like, if I'm worried about something, I can take it into like 25 chapters of what horrors can happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I run through scenarios and will wonder, because you can't help but stop and think, my God, if something had, if I'd taken more time to eat breakfast, or if I hadn't skipped breakfast, or just these things that happen in the day in human lives. And in fact, mine are very tepid. I run into all kinds of people who have incredible stories where, they had taken a little too much time for something and then, missed some cataclysm.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens all the time to hear.
What was terrifying, if someone hasn't read the book, it was referring to a moment, I think you were 2.5, was it about that? And he ran out into the road and a car like braked and almost hit him. They kind of stopped, they were shaking, and then Dad came and grabbed you and pulled you off. And it's one of those moments where that was a crossroads where had the car hit, had you been a second later or something, who knows how that story would have ended. Well, it would have ended right there. It could have.
Yeah, it was eye level with the headlights. I mean, it was...
wow. Yeah. I think about that all the time. I thought it was neat how you drew a few lines. I'm curious, too. I was just at a little section where it says getting lost is part of kilominating, and that's a recurring theme, too. You kind of say it almost didn't really matter. This is about collecting kilometers. Was there ever any occasion where you thought, oh God, I need to be bailed out right now. Come and pick me up. Where you were actually, I've done it this time. I've screwed myself. Any close?
Only
events?
When there's been a malfunction. It has happened. I had set myself up and very well. I was going to do a 300-kilometer ride last year, and I set out at about 2:00 in the morning and got going. And I was just going where Lighthouse Cove is at, and I did this turn out at like the county roads there are as barren as anything. And I looked up and I saw the most amazing thing. There was like a human-sized figure holding a tire like this, but in like the loudest pink outfit. I saw this. I thought, is this an alien? Like, I mean, I've looked for the Sasquatch, while going up the Greenway. Haven't seen anything. I look for UFOs, don't see any at all.
You'd be the guy who would spot them if they're out there.
I would love to. And as it turned out, this was a human being. It was a guy who had a flat. And I marveled at how long it took me to realize that it was a person, I guess is what. Right. So he had a flat, and I asked if he needed any help. He had it all under control. So I kept going. And sure enough, about 5 minutes later, I got a flat. And it was at a time when I should have just gotten a whole new tire, whatever. And I was having a series of flats, but I was like 98 kilometers into my ride. And so I changed it, and I'm pumping it up, and I had kind of this bad pump that was right on the valve, and I got it, and I'm looking at the the thing telling me how much PSI I'm putting in.
Right.
Long story short, I end up snapping the valve off of that.
Oh, no.
And I just about transfigure. So I get another tire onto it, but at that point the bike was going to go into Lake St. Clair, so I had called, because I didn't know if I could trust the new one, so I'd called my wife, and actually, God, it's funny you asked that. I had one this summer. I was in Emeryville, and I was going to the Ride to Survive, Dave Hunter's great thing. And after poor Dave had passed away in June, it was all the more meaningful. So the last 2 years, I ride there. Like not an easy way, but it's like a way to get a 200-kilometer ride.
Everybody drives there. They get out of their cars.
Right.
And then
drove to get there to begin the ride. I thought that was
in 2021. It was the best ride. I rode 31 kilometers an hour for 6.5 hours. Like wow. It was unbelievable. So I set out to do that again. Well, I got to Emeryville, and when I got off my bike at Emery Drive to go in the Petro-Canada to get some water, my arms and legs suddenly felt like a Culligan cooler of just filled with bubbles. And I thought, oh my God, if this is going to happen, like it may as well happen here on this day. Like I'm right near, St. William's Cemetery, and I'm on, and it's the day of Dave's big ride. As it turned out, it wasn't, but all my energy left me. Wow. And so I went up Renault line, and I made it into Essex. And sure enough, it's so funny. I guess I need the physical landmarks. because I made sure I got to which church is it? The Holy Name of Jesus Church. And I thought, well, if I collapse on their lawn, and that's where I phoned my wife and just said, like, I'm going to need a bona fide bailout here. So that was the biggest physical failure of the road.
All things considered, though, those 65,000 plus kilometers, like, you sound like you have a pretty decent track record of not needing too many bailouts.
Yeah, not too many. But
and I know you,
half a dozen.
well, but that's no considering. Okay. Yeah, like the amount of kilometers you've clocked, that shocks me. I didn't know if you were just leaving it out or what, but amazing. Landmarks. You mentioned landmarks just now. Are they? You must have a memory trigger for so many landmarks going through. Like, I imagine the stuff you put in this book is just a fraction of what goes through your head when you're writing, and the things. I imagine so.
For sure. My dad, when I learned to drive a car or just driving around with my dad, we never sought streets. It was always, it's by this convenience store. Right. It's by that dry cleaners. If you go past the second stop sign, and then the idea of anything being north, east, south, or west is like, that's wonderful. You're telling me that it's west of the southern whatever, but it's like left and right is about all I can handle. Yeah. So that's how I learned when driving, and of course as a kid I was always this hyper vigilant kid. I thought, well, I'm 8. My dad passes out. I'll hop in the driver's seat, and in order to get us home, I'll drive us down this way. And obviously it never transpired, but I would be thinking it, and I always want to be prepared.
Yeah.
But yes, the landmarks everywhere. And then my dad, he sees the city like with an acetate over top of what's there now. And he'll say, oh, well, Bartlett's department store was there. He'd be able to look at Huron Church Road now, which to me is like this blank spot. And he would know exactly where everything had been. And all through the city.
I find that fascinating. And what I found interesting, too, was when you did go with the group, and I got the vibe, and I kind of thought the same thing. Not that for a minute am I comparing me going to see 68 movies at WIF by myself to you driving 69 to 65,000 kilometers. Not the same thing,
close, though.
But it was a marathon for me, but a different type of thing. But when I was kind of talking about going to see all those films, and I love doing that. It's kind of my alone time, and the way your train of thought was going while you're riding, I'm seeing this, and now my mind is going here. You tell the story. That happened to me a lot because I was alone during those times. You watch a film, you think of something, your own story. When you went out riding with the group, how do you feel about riding with groups like that? Because it always seemed like, I got the vibe, it's like you seem like more of someone who thrives best, is at your best in isolation, doing it on your own.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what I got.
I wanted to try. I mean, they were so friendly and answered so many of my questions, and were always inviting just anybody out, and getting on the bike and doing this was about breaking down the old things that were barriers to me, and they're barriers I've created. I can just as easily say it's not a barrier anymore. So I went out with the group, and it's no fault of theirs, but you have to be very present when you're riding with the group.
Yeah.
You're riding the peloton, you're about 2 inches off the tire of the person in front of you, which is way too close for me. In fact, I was about 2 feet away, and people in a friendly way were remarking, they go, oh, wow, you're so far away. I'm like, dude,
how close do you want me to get?
Close as I'm going to. And then there are people, everybody's signaling road conditions backwards. So I forget what all the hand signals are, but pothole is one thing, gravel. Because on a road bike, grass clippings is like going over ice.
Really? Wow, I didn't know that.
And or gravel. And I was on a mountain bike. I could ride over anything. If there was a trench, I would have just gone, and they thought that was all right. But I just, to be that present and couldn't zone out for a second.
Yeah.
Because, everybody's, and I went a second time with them, and somebody right in front of me, they hit like a teeny hole in the pavement and blew out both their tires, like 2 gunshots. And I was like a bowling ball, and I just hit my brakes as hard as I could. And this lady, I don't know how I didn't just barrel over everybody, but I didn't. But I thought, okay, that's plenty. That's
yeah.
That's plenty. I ended up doing like 175 kilometers that day.
Wow.
And then rode another. I wanted to make it a 400 kilometer weekend, and but I can't do the math, so I missed it by. So I had a 390 kilometer weekend.
Right,
because
right.
Of the,
You use the word I'm a lone obsessed hobbyist, and that in a good way. I got that as a positive. It's something that you
the
enjoy
group
doing.
is very friendly. There's not
Right.
one moment that the group was anything but friendly.
They seem lovely from the
awesome.
characters in the book that you kind of mentioned. They seem very accommodating,
Yeah, they
helpful,
are.
and concerned and caring and whatnot. But I did love how once you got the app on your phone, it did become about the numbers, and you thought, okay, I'm here. I'm at 78 kilometers. I'm going to ride around the block 4 times until I hit that 80. Like, did it become an obsession for you? Would you say obsession is the right?
Yeah. And it's so funny. It was neighbor Todd who had recommended the app.
Yeah.
And my phone, I use to listen to music and as a camera. And the idea of apps, like, there's just no way. So he said, "Okay, you should get this app." So I thought, well, I'll try it because he has some good ideas. And so I tried it, and oh my God, to just see how the kilometers pile up. Like after a week, or I forget if it was 2 weeks, it was like close to 100. And I thought, my God, 100 kilometers. And so to keep going, and it's just what, as you described, and then as soon as I satisfied the kilometer count, I'd look over at the calories. I go, oh well, I'm at 988, so I should just keep going.
Yeah.
But then I've blown out the kilometers. I go, well, if I go another few, I'll be at 105. And I mean, you can actually make it until you just pass out.
Yeah. Oh, for sure you could.
So
yeah.
eventually, I have to just say, I'm going to go in. No.
Yeah, I get it though. Do people, and maybe even family members could even address this? When people hear this, like 65,000 kilometers, that sounds like a huge achievement to me. I don't know what the math of biking is, but I don't think that's an easy thing to do. That's a lot of hours and dedication. Did people ever think, like, what are you doing, man? You're crazy. Did anyone ever think that? Like you rode how
I'm
long?
sure
You're
all
going,
the time, but I'm very well used to it. In fact, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It could be a lot of other things. Absolutely. I wish I could get obsessed with
But it's
something
a
like
question.
that.
Even my mother-in-law will good natured. Why would he do that? Why would he about various things that I'm?
Did you do today?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
It blows my mind hearing that. And I knew you'd do it though when you made a little post saying I'm hoping to get to 65,000 kilometers by the book club. In my head, I thought, well, that sounds ridiculous, but he's absolutely going to do it, and here we are.
Yeah, I was about 150 away, and but after a while, you get used to it. Again, I can't emphasize enough how building up to it. I mean, I spent months where I'd go 10 in a day, and I thought 10 kilometers. I remember one time when I would share my data with neighbor Todd because he got a bike at the same time, and we were kind of going back and forth. I did 29 kilometers. This one ride, I thought he'll want to have me committed that I've done 29 kilometers today, and then I thought, well, if I did 29, why wouldn't I just got 30 even?
Yeah.
And then, but for months I was doing like those kind of numbers, and then eventually I wonder if I can piece together a route to get to Emeryville or to my parents' house. They live in Tecumseh. Right. That only turned out to be 29 kilometers one way, and I had my dad ask him if he would drive me back.
Right.
So that's how it began. So it wasn't, I mean, I did not hop on and suddenly feel like Hercules and do this, but every once in a while I would push it. Like the first 200 kilometer one, about halfway through, I was wondering, well, you get yourself so far out, you think, well, I've got to get myself home. And I've run out of water on occasion, and, but if it gets really desperate, I just stop at someone's house and just say, "Hey, man."
Have you done that, really?
I haven't yet, no.
Okay, okay. Well, let us know how that goes. If that does happen. Sure. That could be a whole other book right there, depending on which house you stop at. How much do you plan out? Because I thought it was just interesting the way it told your story, the way it ended on the big bike ride day, and that happened to be on the same day as your dad's surgery. I thought what a climax it was. And then when it ended with your stats, it was mind blowing seeing. Like, what is it? My totals for the day, boom, 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 200 kilometers. I thought it was amazing you ended with we have more bread than Jesus, which reminded me of my dad. That's so something he would say too. But I thought it was so interesting that that you culminated on that day, this big, massive bike ride, and the big day for your father's surgery. I thought that was an interesting way to end. Why did you choose to end it there?
Well, my brother's a doctor. So when my dad had a heart attack at age 81, my brother came down, and I mean, he knew everything. He was an ER doctor. He knew people. He's in St. Catharines, had worked at Hotel Dieu here, and we hate line jumpers, but when your dad needs something, I would have driven to Ottawa to get the Prime Minister to go do something like.
Yeah.
So my brother was able to come down and kind of knew how the stuff worked. I was unable to do anything. And I say that, and actually, when I went to visit my dad, they'd given him some medication. His surgery was delayed because he had fluid in his lungs. And I always forget this, but like, there's really only one way to get fluid out of a person. They got to pee it out.
Yeah.
And so the poor guy, he just had a hernia operation a week before, and he's doing the equivalent of a sit-up every time he gets up. And everybody's reminding him about that. Well, he doesn't care, because a week before the hernia operation, he's carrying the vacuum up the basement stairs and falls all the way back down the wooden stairs. And all my mom hears is him pick it up and come back up the stairs. He's like the original stuntman.
Yeah.
And so I was visiting my dad. Once my brother had gone away, I got onto the list to be able to go in. And we're watching Jeopardy. I now see where my love of television came from. And my dad, in the middle of Jeopardy, he's suddenly going, "Oh my God, where is it at?" And he's in this sudden panic, like a really sudden panic. I think, oh, it's got to be medical. And he starts talking about Blue Bloods. Now, I eventually came to understand he was talking about a TV show. But for a second, I'd been a technical writer at Blue Cross Blue Shield in Michigan, and remember writing about a fecal occult something or other, and like just these strange medical. So I thought, Blue Blood? Like, what? I'm not even I don't need something explained to me to know it's an emergency. So he's in this panic. And I guess my whole thing was I came through because I was actually eventually able to find the show on television with the help of my wife.
Yes.
It certainly wasn't
9
mine.
o'clock.
9
o'clock, CBS, yeah.
I texted my wife and was somehow able to. But yeah, I was unable to really do anything. So I was just thinking of him. I wore his shoes, and I don't wear the clip-on shoes when I cycle. I just want my feet to be free. I can say that Skechers are not particularly great biking.
Which is what you were wearing at the end.
And that's what I wore for my 200-kilometer ride.
Right.
But it was really satisfying because when we left, I'll never forget, we were all gathered. There's 100 people. And I mean, some of the bikes people had, I mean, I don't know much about them, but you can see some of them are about $5,000 or $6,000 or $10,000 bicycles. And there's a whole troop of these super cool guys, and all in their matching. They look like villains from an 80s John Hughes movie. And I thought, oh, that's fine for you guys. And I've got my dad's Skechers on.
Yeah.
I got my Spider-Man buff around my face so I don't get bugs in my mouth. And I'm looking at those guys, and we're all standing for a picture, and they ride out. And everybody's going, oh, well, why are they leaving now? They're getting a head start. And the whole mantra of the thing was, it's not a race. It's not a race. So it's like, okay, it's not a race. So we stand, we get our picture taken. And then we finally get to go. Well, I didn't want to get hampered by the crowd, so I just kind of darted as quickly as I could to get out. I figured the onslaught would catch up to me immediately. So I was just riding and riding. I had a road bike by that time, so I was actually moving pretty good. And the onslaught never reached me. And I remember turning, and there was absolutely nobody around. And I thought, okay. There was no specified route as well, which I found really strange because they had to just go through all the concession roads. And it's like, well, I know where to go. So anyway, I was getting into Kingsville, and through the trees, I couldn't believe it. I saw the jerseys of the team that had left like 15 minutes early. Yeah, okay. So I put it on a bit, and I caught right up to them. And of course, like, again, being villains from the 80s movie, they've got a bike car. Like they're being followed, and the SOB is half on the bike lane and half in the road. And I go, okay. So I go up, and I just get into the oncoming lane, and I caught up to them, and it was very satisfying, the looks the guys in the car gave me. And then as I made my way up past all the cyclists, they're all like, every one of them, their helmet cost more than my whole setup. And I kept going. I have to admit, my lungs felt quite taxed, but I thought, there's no way. So I kept going. I've got my Skechers on, my dad's Skechers on, and I got past them. I thought, it's good that you got past them. Now you got to stay past them.
Right.
So I kept it going. And anyway, all that MacDonald's I'd eaten 25 years ago powered me. And by the time I look back, I didn't see them either.
Wow. So it was a moment too. Like there was that thing,
okay.
Just like you made it whole. Like
it was very satisfying. That actually happened for sure.
Does that shock you too? Like did that surprise you when you realized like, Oh yeah, in this whole journey, and it seemed like you were doing it for personal reasons and the isolation and all that stuff. And it seemed to me you were working a lot out on that bike in your head organically. But did it shock you when you're like, oh, I've also become a really decent cyclist in all of this? That's like it almost seems that was it really showed up in that moment. It's like
Right,
he's
yeah.
also really, really good. Like did it surprise you?
It surprised me a lot, yeah. But I was also very pleased that the petty competitive side of me could come out as well. And I thought, okay, that guy's not dead. I'm glad he's still here. But I was when I saw that I'd caught up to them even at all. I thought, well, I'll ride. In fact, I was just as glad not to be surrounded by bikes.
Yeah.
I'll just ride to the thing was the Blooming Gardener was the finish line, and I ended up getting there so early. They didn't even understand.
Right,
They
yeah, they
thought
weren't even
I
ready
wanted
for
to
it.
shop. And they
Wow.
where's your car? And by then I'd done 173 kilometers, and then I said, well, you're going to have a bunch of cyclists coming through at some point, so and then I just left. And then texted Dave Hunter. I said, well, I've been to the finish line, and I'm just going to make it an even 200. So, and I passed the SOBs and the jerseys. So,
What's that? That's wild to me.
Yeah, and then I rode home.
That blows my mind. Like, and the funny thing is, like, because you are so in the greatest possible way. We get to be in your head in this book. We're on the bike with you while you're riding, and it sucks us right back into your thoughts and memories. So you always do have this. This is my take on it anyway. There always is a little bit of a like, am I one of them? I'm not one of them. You strike me as a bit of an outsider. Like you're not the people with the matching jerseys and the fancy getup. You're the person at the machine shop where everyone knows what they're doing, but you're like, what am I doing? I get a bit of an outsider vibe here, and there's little moments where you realize, like, no, like you're exceeding a lot of this. It's a strange realization for me seeing this just the way outsider, but also really, really good at what you do too. Like very accomplished writer, but there's this insecurity in your head. I don't know if insecurity is the right word or not, but
no, for sure.
I mean?
I seem to come at things from an odd angle.
Yeah,
I
you
think
do.
Might be the gentlest way to to put it. But I end up reaching the destination. They go, "Oh, you burrowed through the ground. You could just take the sidewalk." I go, well, thought I'd try another way. Outside the box.
How much of this, because it sounds like you didn't map out your route so much, you kind of just drove and took the turns, and the longer the route, the better, because it's more kilometers. How much did you map out with this book when you were writing it? Did you have a beginning and an ending, or was it?
Only after, I remember when I had passed the cycling group, I was quite pleased. I thought, okay, that's going to be
That's the climax.
So thank you, villains, for that was perfect.
Yeah.
But no, I didn't have much because that's always the key thing is like where to stop.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're going to make this a 500-page book, or want to keep it lean so that it is like a readable thing. And then how many, when have you hammered the point home too many times?
Right.
And you don't want to exhaust the reader. So that I always struggle with. That's once the page, it realizes, okay, we haven't talked you out of writing it by saying who cares. So we realize you're going to keep going. So now we're going to say, well, when are you going to stop? I mean, are you just going to go on forever? Are you just going to go on forever? And so eventually, that's why, hearkening back to my dad had come to, I lived in Dublin for a while, and my dad came to visit me, and when he arrived, it was just too funny. His luggage was lost, which turned out to be great, so he was unencumbered with anything. So we just went bar hopping all through the city. And by the time we got to where I lived, it was about 4 p.m. I was drunk, and he thought, well, we may as well. You've got a shopping mall right here. Why don't we get some stuff so I can make some chili? And I thought, that sounds really good. So we go into the grocery store, and my dad really likes like the Irish soda bread and everything. So we load up one cart with that, and then all the other stuff goes into another. And when we got to the checkout, and it was after work, every lane's full, the cashier said, wow, you're a real man for the bread. And my dad said in this like evangelist voice, we've got more bread than Jesus. And every head in every lane just turned and looked over. Who's got more bread than Jesus? So that's with all his good lines. He doesn't remember saying it, but I do, and about 65 Irish people remember.
Oh, that's hilarious. Well, I love that too. I mean, spoiler alert here, it's the last line in the book as well. And I was ready to read more about Dad. Like, I wanted to hear more. And I thought it was interesting because it kind of reminded me as the impression I got of it, reading as an English major back in the day, I ripped things apart, was that it's a continuous bike ride. The bike ride continues and onward we go. And it was an ending. It was an absolute ending, but it was the perfect time because it's like the story continues. It wasn't an end. It was to be continued. Is there going to be a to be continued?
I had thought about it, and I've got some notes about it because there's still interesting observations. For instance, my brother and his family, they invite us up to visit them in Huntsville in the summertime, and my sister-in-law, who had taken up cycling at the time, she goes, "Oh, well, you have to bring your bike." So I thought, okay, yeah, that sounds great. Well, I wasn't ready for the hills of Huntsville, and the Essex County is extraordinarily flat, so I brought my bike. And I knew there was something where, like the resort complex, I couldn't get out of the driveway. Like I was going up and I'm pedaling and pedaling. It's getting slower until my feet stopped and I just hovered for a second. And I thought, because I'm superstitious about getting off the bike, and I walked it. So I got into the hills of Huntsville. At one point, I'm doing like 55 kilometers an hour down one. And I look down, I go, oh, there's loose gravel, like that thing. So I just hang on and go straight. Eventually, I'm doing 63 kilometers an hour on the bicycle.
Oh my God, terrifying.
I noticed their garbage pails look different than they do here. Wow, they're very elaborate. And I realized those are bear-proof garbage pails. Why would they have a bear-proof garbage pail in Huntsville? Because they have bears.
Wow.
I heard a hawk. Oh my God, I'm such a city slicker. I heard a hawk. I went, okay, that is plenty. It was in the tree above me. I thought, that's enough. I got to get home. And I somehow did. I got the Google Maps out, but the hills don't go away.
Yeah.
So that was one adventure.
Your falls were very realistic as well. I fell off my bike once, and I was too cool to wear a helmet too. That's fixed now. I wear a helmet now. But everyone's like, well, Daniel, I'm like, it's only a 7-minute drive to work. I'll be fine. Like that's about as far as I bike. And sure enough, didn't I fly off my bike and crack my forehead on the curb? Oh. And luckily, it was just enough. Like I kind of braced my fall where it whacked, but it wasn't anything that did a lot of damage. I was very lucky. And of course, my first thing is not, did I crack my head open? It's like, oh my God, who just saw me? Yeah. Like, it's cool, I'm good, I'm cool, I'm okay. Meanwhile, I could have my head split open, and that was my concern, was who just saw me look stupid. But I loved how I laughed, even though I was like, oh God, he fell. I loved how it seemed your first concern was like, who just saw me? Like, I get that.
It's like, why am I so full of myself? I just wiped out, and some of them were pretty good. Yeah. I had one recently, and this is going to be the last one ever. It was just over on Mayfair and Bouffard. I just came into the turn a little too fast, and I went into the morning time, so the dewy grass, and it just slipped right out from underneath me. But I know how to go with the roll, and I guess it's told me I'd fallen enough times. This time I didn't care who saw it, so I went somersaulting down the path. And I thought, let's make us stand there and laugh. I'm going to jump over their fence. But if anybody observed these things, I've no doubt they'd want to offer help. But
sure, But
that is the first thing, which is just bizarre. I've hit my head a couple times, and thank God that the helmet doesn't feel like anything, and it's unbelievable protection.
Yes, yeah. I will not go without a helmet now. If it's
I did as well. My wife came home the one day, and she goes, here's a helmet. You got to wear a helmet.
I enjoyed that part. I think you mentioned that a few times. Like, my wife saw to it that I was wearing a helmet from now on, and that's my thing too. I didn't tell many people. I didn't go home and tell anybody that. So I cracked my head in a curb today. I just went and quietly got myself a helmet and said, we're going to keep that between me and the book club here. So no one needs to know that happened, that I had my forehead on a curb after going over my handlebars. And also, I had to throw out the pair of pants. Somehow, I'm not sure if this ever happened to you, this was an extra layer of humiliation. When I went over the handlebars, something on my pants snagged, and it tore the ass out of my pants. So I basically rode home in my underwear, too, wondering if I had a concussion. So that happened. And those pants went immediately in the garbage. We just never spoke of it again. So if I ever write a chapter of biking, that'll be in the first chapter.
Oh, my God.
I did love this too. It was the little snapshots. The book made me so nostalgic because we're not too far apart in age. We're only about 5 or 6 years apart in age, so we grew up in very, very close to the same era. And this little snapshot that you wrote here, bringing glasses of beer out to Dad and Grandpa in the backyard as a kid, asking for a sip, tasting that horrid brew, and wondering why they didn't drink Coke instead. The older I got, though, I couldn't wait to drink beer as they did. And when I came of age, beer didn't taste any better, but I associated it with fun. Opened a beer and good memories flowed. Then being drunk, thinking, okay, this is the way. That was my thing. Is when I was a kid, Dad, can I have a sip of your beer? And I'd drink it and like, oh, why would you drink that? And when I was legal age and we could start drinking with friends, I thought, I'm gonna stomach through this. And I think it was the first time I got the buzz on. I'm like, aha, that's why they drink beer in the backyard. I get it. And I had to reel it in quite a bit too, because I was a very hard partier in my teens and my 20s. So it was such a relatable book, so well done. And I think I can share this because you mentioned it in the book too. You actually did make a documentary about JT,
I did.
which it's on YouTube. I'm not sure if anyone has looked it up yet, but it must be shared on your socials and whatnot. But I thought that was a really great thing. I think that just started. You wanted all his pictures in one spot, then you saw there was a lot more happening.
Yeah, when I had done that search that one day, the Friday before Labor Day weekend, his mom was dying, and there was this feeling of time running out, and so I had visited her, and she by then was actually at an assisted living home because she'd had pneumonia and just could not be at the house. Anyway, I asked her if we could make a visit there, and as it turned out, all the family albums were there, and so I was photographing the photographs because I thought this is my chance.
Yeah.
And as it turned out, she had like his old baseball glove and his jean jacket and a number of artifacts from his life, that all of which I was able to take. I was embarrassed to ask for them, and she was amazed anybody would want them. She'd offer them to all his cousins, and this poor lady was left there thinking, well, like nobody wants this stuff, and like I couldn't pile it in the car like fast enough. I said, whatever I can have.
Yeah.
But there was this feeling of time running out, and then the same thing with like the photographs. I thought, well, I would like to have them all in one spot, so I had video editing software, so I thought, I'll just put it all in one spot. But then you see the photos, and I can, for some reason, I'm a storyteller, so it made sense to tell the story.
Yeah,
So,
it was fast. I was glad you sent that my way, and I am that person too. I like to, like, I was creeping your Facebook, reading this book. I'm like, what do the kids and what does his wife look like? You know, because you read the book and you want to get the visual, right? I do it with all the authors, and I tell them I do it, so I'm not trying to be creepy. But I thought that was so neat because this book almost, for his very short life, it was almost as much about him as it was you, because he was always there. I felt every time his name came up, I thought like, oh, this is here. I was excited to read about him. So you asked earlier, is anyone going to care? Like, I did, and why I don't know, but I was so into it when you sent me that documentary that you made the other day. He just kind of randomly said, oh, by the way, if you're reading the book and you enjoy it, and here's a little documentary I made about JT. And I thought, yes, I was kind of hungry for more material, and it was very, very well done. It was a beautiful tribute to him, and as the book is a beautiful tribute to him as well. I'll open it up to questions too for anybody, but really quickly, what do you hope, when somebody does read this, what do you hope their takeaway is?
I think it's as individual as the readers themselves. I mean, I just put it out there if they find a bit of inspiration about the cycling, or if they like. I wanted to chronicle some of my the funny stories that I remember of my dad. They might enjoy those. But I mean, reading, I'll take. I have no doubt I take things from authors' books that they didn't set out to do. So it's not up to me to say, oh, I hope they take this.
Right.
I'm just so thrilled for people to read it. Your response to it has just been so heartening, and the fact that we have a full room here of people, I cannot tell you. When I was writing this, and I'm in my living room, and I'm just thinking, oh my God, I'm just amusing myself. And,
no, it's truly it is. I think it's my favorite book that we've done in the book club so far, and I was seeing it so visually, because the visual cues were there, so I could geographically see it in my head. But there was one moment, I forgot to highlight it, and I wish I did. It's one of my favorite parts. It's when you're talking about the old ColecoVision and Atari games you used to play. Bugline, I think was it Bugline?
Superbug.
Superbug, yeah, Superbug. That's it. You were talking about that, and then it was merging into where you were riding, and it was merging into a memory. And I thought, wow, if this were a movie right now, there would be animation and flashbacks, and it reminded me of an Oliver Stone, like a Natural Born Killers type of movie with the collage. It was a collage of thought, and I thought, this is chaotic, what I'm reading right now, but it's such a vivid, beautiful story, pulling from all different parts of your life, and I just thought it was such a well done book. It was so great, and well done. Congratulations
Thank
on
you very
this.
much.
Definitely. Does anybody have any questions about the book? Yes.
What elementary school did you go to?
I went to Sacred Heart in West Windsor.
Are you kidding me?
I'm not, on Cameron Avenue.
I graduated there.
Did you?
Hey.
I graduated in 1985 from there.
I was a little later than that. Yeah, I'm still in my 40s. I mean, you're younger than me. But strangely enough, Leslie Curry, I grew up at the other end of Curry. I grew up right across from Pennsylvania.
Oh,
Right. My friend Craig Murphy had lived there, and Karen Fontaine.
Wow.
I'm like, oh my god, oh wow. And then to Leslie and going down university, and I'm sitting like, oh my god, they should put out there.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
Great, yeah.
And your father-in-law?
Hmm. Yes.
Oh my god.
Where it all began.
That's really funny. Is he having enough orange juice yet?
I felt very guilty because he was a great guy. We had fantastic conversations, and as my wife would every once in a while, I would say, "Oh, your dad was telling me this," and they were all stories she'd never heard.
Wow.
Oh yeah, I took Michelle's mom to see what was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
That was wild.
I
Yeah.
thought, really. I waited till I was like 35 before I saw that, and
That had to be surreal for you, hearing stories of your dad that you didn't know.
A lot of stuff I know he told Matthew and I had no idea.
Wow.
yeah.
When he was dating my mom, it was all like recollections of when they got together when they were younger. And I had no idea.
That's
He wouldn't tell us, I don't know why.
yeah.
All the cool Matchbox cars I had, well, he owned the real thing in real life and raced them in Detroit. And okay, wow, that's pretty
And I
good.
love the whole business.
So,
Yeah. You had your hand up earlier, sir. I'm so sorry that I missed you. Well, this one's actually an autographed copy. This was very special to me.
oh, for
Is it?
sure.
Yes,
For
yes.
sure.
Champion of artists and other fragile life forms is the signature, which I love. But yeah. Do you have copies for sale?
I do indeed.
Yeah, if anybody does
Yeah,
want to buy
I
a
brought
copy,
my-
for sure. And any questions, any thoughts on the book? Yes.
You are cyclist Forrest Gump.
Yeah. Yeah. Keep going. Yeah.
And
That's a good comparison, actually. It really did. Not in a rip-off way, just that is kind of how it plays out.
Yeah, so is there somewhere you want to cycle or want to come back, some memory that you want to unlock, or?
I would like to do a 300-kilometer ride. I have thought of riding up to my brother's house. He lives in St. Catharines. I think that's just over 400. But I'm very conscious of, like, I'm not a child, and I don't want to just get myself into danger. I don't want to be that guy like, oh, I'm going to go row my boat near the Niagara Falls. Well, I didn't know it was going to pull me. Who would have thought
It's a hell of a view.
that could happen, right? And then you have every emergency person in the world coming out to save your,
Yeah, right.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So I don't want to be that guy. But and then when I do, last year I did a 228-kilometer ride. I could not do the extra 2 to get 230.
Mm.
I actually wanted to get 220 but wasn't home yet, so I had to keep going. So I got the extra 8. But those are the things I had thought of.
Over that at some
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
when
one
he
time-
did 65,000, yeah, I think I'm done. You're not. Is it 70? What is the next thing?
Yeah.
So the numbers run out, I guess. I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
And it's a continuous journey. So I give you kudos for everything.
Oh, thanks. I mean, and I was aware the whole time, like, this is not the most dramatic weight loss a person's ever gone through. I mean, but I'm not trying to present it that way, and I don't have any advice in any direction other than wear your helmet. And if you see your twin from a parallel universe, don't touch them because you'll explode.
That's right. I learned
Aside from
that.
that, I've got no other useful advice. Keep your tires inflated. It's 3 pieces.